Well, this is our final page for chapter 21 on the Industrial Revolution. Your assignment today goes with this page, but it's actually from chapter 20, section 4. So just don't be confused when you see that. Also, there's a study guide that I've put in because there's so many people's names and a lot of vocabulary terms and definitions. Excuse me. So what I would traditionally do is give you class time in groups of 2 or 3 to study together. And I mean, if you have the chance to do it with somebody, it really works well. So what you would do is take your paper, this isn't it, but it would have the names down one side and then what they did. And you would just say something like Eli Whitney. And then the person would try to think, what did that person do? If they can't think of anything, then you would move on and say, invented the cotton gin. Then the next time you switch papers, that person would say Eli Whitney, and hopefully since you just read it, you'd be able to come up with some information. And then the third time through, say who invented the cotton gin. And by that time, you should be able to say Eli Whitney. And then the fourth time through, mix it up, whatever. So if you have the chance, that's great. If not, my wife helped me type these up. There's also, besides quizzes that you can go through to do for the test, the information from the 2 study guides is in Quizlet. So there's 2 of those sections, one for people's names and one for the terms and definitions. So take a look at those, study, and we'll plan to do this test on Monday. Okay. So we start off with psychology. We had already talked about sociology, which is why do we as groups of people do certain things, but psychology is why do you as an individual person do certain things. So it is the study of the mind and behavior. What in your background has caused you to act that way or to do certain things. Ivan Pavlov, a very famous psychologist, human response is a result of mechanical reactions to stimuli. And so he experimented with dogs, and what he did was he would feed the dogs at a certain time, and every time they were fed, he rang a bell. And I think he rang the bell before feeding them. So, okay, rang the bell, dogs got fed. Rang the bell, dogs were fed. What he found was later he would ring the bell, but there was no food. And the dogs, in anticipation of eating, even though there was no presence of food, no sight, no smell, the dogs were salivating in anticipation of eating the food. So they were conditioned to that response. This is a funny little comic cartoon. It says that this dog is talking to his little friend dog here. Watch what I can make Pavlov do. As soon as I drool, he'll smile and write down in his little book. So maybe you found something in your life that you do something over and over again, and you just kind of get conditioned to doing that without really thinking about it much. Okay, another psychologist was Sigmund Freud, and he said people act in response to unconscious needs and desires. You know, we have these basic needs as human beings: food, shelter, to be safe, to be protected, to have a sense of belonging, to be loved. Those are some basic needs and desires. And so he's saying that we act in response to those unconscious needs and desires. Okay, in today's section that you'll do on your assignment deals a lot with art, and these were some new trends and things that were also going on during this industrial age. So Impressionism was a style of art. They tried to present an impression of a scene at a given moment. So if you woke up in the morning and saw the sunrise and there were clouds and it was a beautiful image, and you tried to paint that, you would want to paint it so that somebody looking at it would have the same impression that you got when you actually saw it. So that's what they felt about Impressionism. So that would be the example of that one. This one, I'm not a big fan of this type of art. This particular one is called Cubism, depicting natural shapes as geometric forms. I mean, that's not too bad. There's some abstract art that I just shake my head. It's amazing. You know, some artists can have a blank white canvas and draw a red line down the middle, and oh, it's worth thousands of dollars because of who did it. I don't agree with that. Okay, realism. This was presenting life as it actually existed. This one right here is actually a picture, or a drawing, sorry, but it looks just like a picture. So that would be realism. This is a picture of Charles Dickens, and he was a social critic who portrayed the poor and the downtrodden. So in his literature, his stories was some examples of realist art or literature where he wrote about what things were going on, how they actually existed, how people lived. However, his stories, as you watched with Oliver Twist, his stories usually had a happy ending. So it was a sad story, his mother dying in childbirth, the conditions that those boys had to live in. But in the end, you know, after possibly, you know, he could have been killed, but in the end, there was a great family that he came in contact with. He was going to live with them, had, you know, plenty of food, nice clothing, a very nice house to live in, probably would have had opportunities for education. So Charles Dickens usually had happy endings to his stories. Okay, socialism. The means of production would be publicly owned and operated for the good of all people. A lot of people are like, oh, we need a socialist society, and they obviously don't understand what that is, okay? A quick example, I don't know if I mentioned this in class or not, but a college professor said, okay, we'll do your grades as if this were a socialist society. So the first test came up, and you know, the students that studied real hard and paid attention and worked and all of that got an A. Other kids that maybe didn't do quite as well, you know, study as much, there were B's and then some C's, there were D's, and then there were students who failed. And then he took all the scores and he averaged them, and everybody got like a B. Okay? The next test came along, and the kids who studied real hard were like, gee, if I'm going to study real hard and only get a B, I'm not going to study as hard. And the kids who failed, they're obviously not going to study. So the average went to a C. And by the end of the term or semester, everybody failed because nobody tried. And, you know, socialism, in my opinion, does not work. If I'm working hard and you're not doing anything, yet you get equal of what I do, that doesn't work. So a utopia is an ideal society. Also, with socialism, this little thing says, any government that is capable of giving you everything you need is also powerful enough to take away everything that you have. So, again, I don't think socialism is a good thing. It's very similar to communism. This was introduced by Karl Marx, Russian Revolution, 1920s, 1921. No, actually, yeah, a little bit before that too, with the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. Property and the means of production would be owned by the people. And the proletariat was the wage-earning class. That proletariat especially found in Russia. Then over in Great Britain, some of their political parties and systems. So the first two they had were the Whigs and the Tories. And in our country, the Whigs and the Tories became the Democratic and Republican parties that we know today. Back then, they became liberal and conservative parties. Today, William Gladstone was the liberal and Benjamin Disraeli a conservative. Now, if you were all sitting in front of me, I would ask you the question. The Liberal Party, which of the two, Democrat or Republican, would be considered liberal? And I'm sure some of you would answer, well, that's the Democrats. And then who would be the conservative? Obviously, that would be the Republicans. For example, a very heated issue would be abortion. Well, most Democrats and liberals would say the woman has the right to choose, that's okay. Whereas conservatives, Republicans typically would say, no, it's not right. That baby doesn't have the choice. So anyway, that's kind of the ideas with liberals and conservatives. And then suffrage, I think we've mentioned a little bit, the right to vote. I don't know where they come up with the name of suffrage, but it is, again, people's right to vote. In our country, the right to vote came to women in 1920. There were 4 states, and Utah was actually one of the first. Wyoming and not sure the other 2, but and then over time, gradually, everyone, every person over 18, as it is now, can vote. So, and then labor unions, these were designed to represent workers' interests. I think we talked about it with the guilds. Yeah, back in the Middle Ages, we mentioned the guilds. So today's equivalent would be a labor union. Sometimes not such a good thing, but for the most part, they did help people to, when the Industrial Revolution started, people were working 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days. That's very difficult. So now we have a 5-day, 40-hour work week. Now there are some modifications to that. A lot of people work 4 10-hour days, and that's the same thing. You work 40 hours a week and have 3 days off. In school, we have our 5 days of those hours, and then we're done. So yeah, labor unions can be a good thing. So, and that should be the end of, whoops, sorry, I didn't change that. It should say Monday, so disregard that. We'll do this on Monday.